back to Jacey's Creek. My name's Emily. I'm your host, and this is a podcast where we talk about Pacey and Joey as a couple and as individuals, scene by scene, episode by episode, without missing any scenes of them too, hopefully. So today we are talking about episode 12, A Weekend in the Country. And if you have not already, make sure to do 3 things while you're listening. Number 1, make sure to follow my Instagram, that's Witter and Potter, my TikTok, that's Pacey and Joey, and lastly, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment while you're listening, that's Jacey's Creek Podcast. And without further ado, let's get into it. So, this episode came out on January 17th, 2000. I may be wrong by this, I just want to point that out because I'm not really sure where this, reliable information came from. It came from Wikipedia, Wiki. So that's all I have to say. So the first scene that we have is scene 1 of Pacey and Joey. So this is where they're at the Potter and B&B. They don't really talk about the B&B much in any of these episodes really, but it just suddenly kind of appears. And so Dawson, Joey, and Pacey are in all one space, which is very surprising. I think that only happens a couple of times, and even then Andy and everyone else is over there. So they're watching the Big Chill, and Joey says, "Who are these people? I mean, they're dancing. No one dances in the kitchen," which I dance in the kitchen, so I just put on a bunch of music and I'm like, heck yeah, I'm home alone. So Dawson says, "Your parents dance in the kitchen." I mean, my parents love this movie. This is the defiant moment of every baby boom generation. And Joey asks Pacey, "Do your parents dance in the kitchen?" And Pacey says, "My parents? No, they definitely don't dance in the kitchen." Which makes me wonder, how Pacey's parents were to each other. You wonder how John Witter went to someone I'm assuming her name's Mary or something. I heard that was a rumor. What is their relationship like? I always wondered that. And so Joey said, so then Joey handing popcorn to Dawson say, "Here." And Dawson says, "I don't know. I took the movie pictures off my wall, everything in question. I figured why not something unexpected for movie night," which, I mean, nothing is unexpected with movie night, Dawson. And so Joey says, "Oh, so we're scaling new heights of the Mount Lane." And Dawson says, "Sorry, Joey, tonight's activities are meant to calm your nerves, not agitate them," which I do love how, Dawson never calms her down, but, Pacey's just amused by this whole situation. And Joey says, "Well, that's impossible. I mean, this bed and breakfast has open for a day, a very costly bed and breakfast, mind you, and there are no guests. Have either one of you checked the reservation list? There's not a name to be found. Not one." And Dawson says, "Joey, it takes time to establish a reputation." And Joey says, "Dawson, Bessie and I have invested every dime we have. Along with the guests, time is another thing that we don't have." And then the phone rings, and Joey composes herself before answering. And she says, "Potter B&B, can I help you?" And her face falls, and she says, "No, actually, I'm perfectly content with my long service, thank you. But how about you? I mean, thinking about a vacation? Come to the Cape, take a room at our lovely..." And she's like, "She hang up on me. A telemarketer hang up on me." And Pacey says, "Come on, Joe. Keep the faith." And Joey says, "Is that all you have to say, considering that you were the primary force that includes Bessie and I down this road of economic ruin?" Which, I don't know if Pacey's just trying to calm her down, but he's kind of amused whenever she has one of those meltdown things. And Pacey says, "All I did was figure out a way to kick in some free labor." Okay, Pacey. And Joey says, you, Pacey Witter, single-handedly encouraged this pipe dream. I mean, you should know better than going around financially, spiritually behind people who have no business being inspired. Which, okay, Joey, you didn't have to go along with this plan. And so there is a knock on the door, and Joey stops, pressuring or getting on to Pacey. And she composes herself, and she walks up to the door and like make sure her like everything's neat, and she points at Pacey's feet and says, "Beat." Which, I don't know why, she just kind of reminds me of a mom whenever she did that. And so then she opens the door and finds a couple standing there. And she goes, "Can I help you?" And a woman says, "Hi, we were wondering." And Joey says, like really hopefully, "Yes." The man goes, "Have you accepted Lord Jesus Christ as your personal savior? God loves you." And he hands her a pamphlet, and I just love how like Pacey and Dawson look amused, but there's like a smile that Pacey does. Like, it's just so funny to me. And then we have the next scene, which is scene 2 of Joey. Or scene 1 of Joey. And so Joey and Bessie are speaking with the woman, and the woman says, "Bess, I gotta be honest with you. I spoke to our manager about you. I made a personal plead, but you're a single mother with multiple demands and an income to depth radio. That doesn't exactly qualify for a much legible profile." And Bessie says, "Is there something you could suggest? Some solutions?" And the woman says, "Well, you could do what a lot of small business do, and that's leverage your assess." And Joey says, "Unfortunately, our Microsoft options have been called and yanks in the hook." And the woman says, "Have you thought about taking out a mortgage?" And Joey says, "On the house?" And the woman says, It is paid for, free and clean." And Bessie says, "Do you have an application?" And Joey just kind of looks like shocked by this in a lot of different ways. So you can just tell how young Joey is in this, and like you can just also tell how stressed out she is by going from the first scene where Pacey knew she was stressed out, Dawson knew that she was stressed out, and Bessie's obviously stressed out because there was a lot of time and money invested into this B&B and no one's coming, and they're like, "Why is no one coming?" And so then the next scene that we have is scene 3 of Joey, or scene 2 of Joey. So they're at the bottom B&B, and Joey and Bessie have just arrived at home, and they make their way into the house. And Bessie says, "I'm gonna think about it." And Joey says, "Bess, it's our house where we live, the only connection we have to Mom. How did you even think about it?" And Bessie says, "Joey, everything takes longer and costs more than you expect. If there is a way a little out, then maybe we should." And Joey says, "Well, you shouldn't do something like this without my approval. I'm not giving it to you." And Bessie's like, "Actually, I can't, because I'm the adult and you're 16. You're a 16-year-old girl." Which is kind of a little bit mean. Like, I know that Bessie's trying to be an adult, and she does this a few times with Joey, where you could just tell, like, she has to be the older person in the situation because they don't have a mom and they don't have a dad, not really. And so when they go in this, it's kind of like, okay, where does Bessie get to draw the line of her being the adult and Joey being the younger sister? So Joey says, "Bessie, I am your sister, a part of this family. If this thing doesn't work out, I lose my house, the only terrible connection that I have." And Bessie says, "She left it to me, Joey. Just because she left me in charge around here until you're 18. That's a responsibility you can't understand." And I feel like that's a little bit mean, because Joey is saying, like, this is my only connection to our mother. Like, the only connection that I have right now. And Bessie's like, "Well, actually, she left the house to me, so I can do whatever I want." Which, I mean, at the same time, it kind of makes sense, but also, like, calm down. Like, Bessie, no, like, you don't get to do that. You agree. You could have been the adult and said, "Actually, that's not a good idea. Like, I don't think we should make a B&B. But instead, you said that. And she's over here like, "It's my responsibility to take care of this house, and she left it in charge around here until you turn 18, but, like, you don't have to, like, manipulate her to, like, understand that. Like, you could say it a little bit more, you know, like, I don't know." So Bessie says, like, Joey says, "I know about the responsibility." And Bessie says, "Do you? Because until you know what it's like to be humiliate yourself by asking some trust fund snob who looks down on you in a high school and for money, I don't want you to talk talk with you about it anymore. And so Pacey goes inside. And Joey is obviously like, what the heck just happened? Because Joey is kind of used to not getting her way. That's not basically what I want to say, but like she kind of thinks that she'll get her way, and then when she doesn't, she always looks so shocked. And so, of course, guess who's behind her when all of this happened? Dawson. And so Dawson is in his yard with his camcorder, and Joey says, "Dawson?" And Dawson says, "Hey, I figured even if my film career is in no man's land, I can at least put this thing into good use, right?" And Joey says, "What are you doing here?" And Dawson says, "Making a virtual tour of Capeside's newest B&B. If we post this thing on the web, we can get all Capeside visitors' info sites." And Joey says, "Dawson, we can't exactly have the money to finish things known as advertising." And Dawson says, "Which is where this thing comes in." And Joey says, "Look, I really appreciate the offer, but," and Dawson says, "No buts, show. This is a good idea. I mean, look at this place. Who wouldn't want to stay here if they see it at every angle and meet the charming profile beforehand?" Which I think was a smart idea, which I'm going to get into this scene later because I feel like it will come in handy when Pacey does something later as well. And I feel like this is like Dawson's way of kind of like being nice and having like using his talents in hand, but Joey exactly, she didn't really want his help, and that was the thing. Like, she didn't like need his help in a certain way, so like why is he giving it to her? Which makes sense why he's giving it to her, because it's like, Joey, you need that advertisement at the same time. So then the next scene that we have is Pacey and Joey, and so they're inside the house, and Joey sits at a kitchen table with like a scowl on her face as Dawson tries to film her. And Dawson says, "Joey, if you want to try to look welcoming, that would be great, because anxiety really doesn't fix in with the whole homie come and stay with us thing we're going for." And Joey says, "Dawson, I do toilets, I do windows. I draw the line at facts prickiness." And Dawson says, "Okay." And Pacey says, "Let me tell you, kiddies, we are looking good. Which, why does he call them kitties? Like, I find that so funny. Like, just imagine, like, Pacey Witter walking in. You would probably scream if that happens. And he's like, "Let me tell ya, kiddies, we are looking good. And Joey says, "What candidate did you swallow?" And Pacey says, "Well, after having a feat, just a teensy-weensy little bit of guilt over having the wrong intonation, I took upon myself to expose Potter B&B to the outside world, featuring many a pen of Mr. Frankenfred." And Dawson says, "Fred who?" And Pacey said, "Frankie. He's like a broader imprint of the B&B world. Writes of travels and lectures, but most importantly, he writes the New York Times travel section. And an exhibition will have nothing but glowing things to say about this establishment, because one of Frank's is frictionally here." And Joey says he's coming here, and Pacey says, "Oh yeah, he's on his way back from Dawson right now, having to fit into his plans. I gave him a call." And Joey's like, "Are you insane?" Which, this is what I wanted to talk about with Dawson's thing. Like, he was gonna be like this nice guy and like upload it to like the website, but like this was kind of comparing Pacey a little bit, where Pacey like completely took it in his own hands without like Joey's permission, without telling Joey what he's gonna do. He went to the guy who wrote the New York Times travel section. Like, okay, Pacey, I see you. Like, not only was he encouraging her and Bessie to make like the most dream thing that they were dreaming about for years, he also took it upon himself to make it where he could have like them to like have the travel section of New York Times. Like, that is amazing to me. And so Pacey, it goes, "Okay," like, and Joey's like, "Are you insane? Have you seen this finished broom. Have you tasted Bessie's blueberry pancakes? We're not ready for something like this. Not to mention that we don't have any guests. And Pacey says, I beg to differ. We do have guests. Not only do we have guests, but we have the perfect guests for the perfect heartwarming welcome at your local B&B guest, if you please. And this is why we love Pacey, because it wasn't the fact that Dawson was like getting his camera out and helping her out and trying to do that. It was the fact that Pacey later took it upon himself to get someone's attention to visit the B&B so that way they can have more travel guests and get all their friends to come to the B&B and act like a guest. And Grams enters with Jen, Jack, and Andy. And Pacey goes, we have this sweet, God-fearing grandmother here to help her grandkids try to reconnect to the magical Cape Side village where she first looked as a little girl. And Andy says, I'll need an 8 a.m. wake-up call. And Jack says, I take my orange juice freshly squeezed. And Jen says, black coffee for me, and God help you if you wake me up before noon. And Pacey said, when Gail walks in, and just to make our home filled with happy Viennese people, we have a lovely married couple here to spend the weekend getaway. And Dawson looks like, what the heck? And you can just tell that Joey is kind of pleased by this, and I love that part. Like, there's such a difference in this scene. I've already said it. Like, the way that Pacey did it versus Dawson, like, we're gonna keep comparing that and throughout this whole season, and maybe even next season, because there are so many things where I'm like, wow, Pacey went beyond and beyond, I can't say that word. And Dawson, he just something that like he was thinking about, like it was like beneficial for everyone, but at the same time he was like, oh, I'm just gonna get my film, even though I'm not really sure if this works, but haha. And Pacey did it without even like a single thought of what it would happen with him. Because I bet Dawson would like write every single thing that it would like inquire with him, like, bye Dawson Mary, and Pacey never does that. And so then we have the next scene of Pacey and Joey. And so they're outside the house, and Joey and Dawson have pulled Pacey outside, and Joey says, one minor detail, Pacey. Don't you think you could have asked me first? And Dawson is just upset that his parents are even there. He's like, do you think you could have let my parents out of this? And Joey says, it was reckless. And Dawson says, and it's insensitive. Like, okay. Pacey, instead of like getting all mad about this, he's like, okay, one at a time, shall we? Starting with you. And he points to Dawson. And he says, I only asked Mitch to help, okay? It was his idea to bring Gil along. And Dawson says, his idea? And Pacey says, yes, his idea. So if you want to tear someone's head off, why don't you try the guy that served you? And to Joey, he says, and as for you, how could you possibly be so ungrateful after just witnessing an outpour of love from the support of George Blenheim Proud? Joey says, there is nothing wonderful about my life right now, okay? And handing the phone to Pacey, says, so I don't care how you do it, but you need to get Brendan on the phone and tell him there is no room at the end. And Pacey says, why? And Joey says, because you don't show a movie reviewer a rough cup, and you don't need to serve food critic your first stab at a recipe, especially if a recipe is your last chance keeping a roof over your head. Pacey says, what? And Dawson says, what do you mean last chance? And Joey says, Bessie is thinking about taking out a mortgage. And Dawson says, what? A mortgage? And then Dawson says, what, a mortgage? You can't let her risk the house. And Joey says, Dawson, does the term legal guardian mean anything to you? Which I love how Joey gets into that, but she doesn't really know what it really meant like 5 seconds ago. Like, that's what Bessie just said. And so that Pacey apologized and says, I'm sorry, Joe. I'll make this right now, okay? And they both all hear a knock, and Joey goes to the door, and she finds a man standing in the entry, which, like, hi, I'm your father. No, that's not what it is. And Joey sarcastically says, don't tell me it's this Fuller Bush man. And Mr. Franklin says, hardly, and hands her a card, and he says, Fred Frankie, B&B, quote, is this a bad time now? And Joey says, no, not at all. And then we have the next scene of Joey, where they're at the Potter B&B in Mr. Franklin's room. Mr. Franklin looks around the room as he's in a barn. And Joey says, so is there anything I can get you? And he says, heat. And Joey says, I beg your pardon? And he says, it's freezing in here. And Joey says, well, that's because we're environment friendly and we love to consume our natural resources, not to mention save our energy bills. And Mr. Frankie says, what? No, it's in sweet convenience. And Joey says, well, excuse me? And Mr. Franklin says, where's the bathroom? And Joey says, oh, just down the hall, it's commute. And Mr. Frankie says, I see, and I don't really know how to say his name, so I just keep saying Franklin and Frankie, so I apologize. And Joey says, well, enjoy your stay. We have high tea at 5 o'clock and breakfast tomorrow morning starting at 7. Enjoy your stay. And Mr. Frankie says, you said that already. And Joey says, you're right, I did, my mistake, which you can just tell that she's just so nervous, and even though the sunlight looks beautiful with her in it, but you can just tell that she's just kind of like everyone else, where when they're upset about something or nervous, Joey really likes to rant, and that is something that I'm bad at too, but I just kind of shut down mentally a little bit too. So when she says, repeats herself, and he calls her out on it, she's like, yeah, my bad. And you could just tell that she's upset. So then we have the next scene of Joey, where they're in the Potter living room, and Bessie and Joey are whispering in the corner and looking at Mr. Frankie, who's sitting on the couch. And Bessie says, does he look like he's having a good time? And Joey does a woman ever look like it's having a good time? And Bessie says, be nice, Joey, he's doing his job. And Joey says, and he has our trust and our entire future. And Bessie says, where is Pacey anyway? He said he'll help me turn on the beds, which, I've mentioned Gilmore Girls sometimes, but the scene that comes into my head when I hear turn the beds is when Laureline comes into Luke's hotel room when he's with Nicole. She's like, sorry, I just need to turn down the beds, and that's what pops up in my head. And so Joey says he's in the bathroom counting animals 2 by 2, and Bessie says, why? What happened? And Joey says, what else? A flood. The toilet overflowed. And you just see Pacey miserably trying to mop the bathroom, and he goes, note to self, career options, delete hotel management. And he just looks so miserable doing it, and it's just so funny to me. I don't know why. But things happen also. Joey can't be hard on herself there. So then the next scene that we have is where Pacey cleans the bathroom, and then the living room is where, and this scene is Pacey and Joey. And Mr. Frankie sits between Joey and Bessie, who are committed and excuses. And Bessie says, this is our first full week of Operation Fred. And Joey says, so we're trying to work on all the kinks. And Bessie says, I think our family-style approach is what sets us up in form of the competition, Fred. And she puts a hand on his knee. And both him and Joey just stare at her excuse me? Are you hitting on me? And Pacey says, bathroom's almost fixed. And Joey says, we have great people working for us. And Bessie says, Fred, have you met our on-side handyman, Pacey Witter? He's so cute. What? And also, is Bessie, isn't Bessie with Bodie during this time? And Mr. Frankie said, no, I haven't found that pleasure. And Pacey says, rest assured, folks, I have everything under control now, taken care of. And then Pacey says that, and there's a loud thump, and a cloud of smoke pours out of the fence. And Mr. Fred goes, you might want to have the handyman Witter check the furnace. Okay. And so Joey is obviously so upset about this, which leads to the next scene, where Joey just bangs on the furnace, and Bessie says, hey, we're in luck. Fred went into town to grab us dinner, and Joey says, shoot. And Bessie says, I don't think swearing at the thing is gonna help. And Bessie says, oh, and flirting with it might? And Bessie says, what's that supposed to mean? And Joey says, nothing. I'm a child, remember? I'll stick with the little things, and have wanted from it everyone from knowing we are freezing to death, and that's what's supposed to coldest night in the year. So Bessie says, you're certainly behaving like a child. No, she's behaving like somebody who has anxiety, not gonna lie. Like, that is a total way of when you have anxiety, you just kind of fall apart a little bit. And so she goes, what is your problem? And Joey says, Bessie, do you remember what it's like to be 16? Is it so far off planet? And Bessie says, I remember. And Joey says, because it's like you have all these responsibilities of an adult, but none of the authority. You can't vote, you can't drink, you can't make any decisive decision about your life. And Bessie says, you think about getting older automatically gives you the say about your life? Get real, Joey. You think I wanted to be stuck here taking 2 kids by myself? Which, okay, like, Bessie, calm down. That's not what Joey was saying at all. And also, like, don't say that in front of your sister who you have to take care of just because your mom and dad died, or mom died and your dad went to jail. Like, it wasn't, like, would you rather put your sister in foster care? Like, because that's probably what it's going to be like. And Joey says, well, I'm really sorry if Alex and you are putting such a crop in your lifestyle, but with any luck, I won't be here much longer to trouble you. And Bessie says, that's not what I meant, and you know it, which it kind of sounded like that's what she meant, but okay. And Joey says, that's certainly what it sounded like. And Bessie says, for a girl who supposedly wants to leave Cape Side as soon as she can, you're sure putting a hell of a lot of effort into this place. And Joey says, you're right. Maybe it's just time I stop. And she walks away. Which also kind of goes back to with her mom. Like, this place is special, and Bessie's like, why is it so special to you? And it's because her mom, like, this was the last thing that really represented her mom. And then Bessie's like putting a mortgage on the house and doing all these different kind of things, but it wasn't the fact that, like, the B&B meant something to her. It meant something to her mom, and obviously there was a hidden message behind that. So then we have the first scene of Pacey by himself. And so he's outside the Potter B&B, and he's angrily chopping wood, like, so mad. And Mitch walks up with an apple, which I don't know why I was annoyed by that. I don't really know. And he says, whose head was that? And Pacey says, not to worry, Coach. If anyone's head belongs on the chopping block, it's mine. Which I like how he calls him Coach, because Mitch is, like, the football coach. And so Mitch says, what makes you say that? And Pacey says, oh, let me count the ways, shall we? For one, it was my idea to refurbish the old furnace instead of buying a new one. And Mitch goes, guilty as charged. And Pacey says, yeah, and this is the one you're really gonna love. It was my idea to prank Frank down into the little weekend in the country. And Mitch says, you did? And Bessie said, yes, I did. Let me tell you, it's not an easy feat, okay? I had to put all the stops on that guy, use my dazzling people skills, and you know what for? A comedy era that's probably going to put the Sister Potters in poorhouse. And Mitch asks, you know what I think? I think that if I were Joey and Bessie, I would consider myself very lucky to have you in my life. Which, I love how Pacey said, like, he went through all this different kind of stuff. And, of course, I also love how he doesn't go up to Joey and just start yelling at her. Like, he's just very, like, upfront with someone else. But he still does what he needs to do because he feels guilty. And one of the things I think about Pacey is he's a number 6, but, like, in Immigrants, where he's just very loyal and he'll always be by the side. And I think that's one of the reasons why he doesn't, like, yell at Joey and Bessie, like, hey, I worked so hard, why are you acting like such a jerk? Like, he just does what he's told, and I think that's a very nice thing to do. And so, Pacey asks why. Everyone and everything that I touch, I screw up, alright? Which, we have talked about this before. Like, Pacey always thinks that he's a screw up, and this is, like, the 3 things I was talking about from a couple, I think, episode 7, where he's, like, a sex addict, or like a screw up, and he's like the screw up in this episode. Like, he always feels like he's a screw up, and no matter what he does, it isn't enough, And that's kind of what this episode is based off of. And he goes, "You're aware of the Minas touch, right? You ever heard of that?" Okay, well, the Minas touch, whatever that is, I got the opposite. Which always makes me laugh. And Mitch says, "Don't be so sure. I mean, look at you. You're still at it, right? You haven't given up, Pace. And instead of dwelling on everything that's gone wrong this weekend so far, think of what you could change. You put in a lot of selfless work into this place. That is the real question. Listen, that goes to the heart of who Pacey Witter is." And Pacey says, "What?" And Mitch says, "What makes you care so much?" So I think kind of Mitch knew that Pacey really cared about Joey, and it wasn't the fact that like everything was going wrong for Pacey, it was the fact that he knew it was going to upset Joey. Like that was the main thing about this episode. Like it wasn't the fact that Pacey was screwing up this weekend, he felt like a screw up. It felt he was feeling like he was failing Joey, which I think he feels a lot towards this. Like this isn't the first time we're going to see that, and it certainly isn't the last, because I'm pretty sure we have seen that before with like Andy, but this is like kind of like the first time that we really see like someone knowing that Pacey really meant, like Joey really meant something to Pacey. And I feel like from episode, let's say like 6, when suddenly we saw the B&B and we saw them hanging out, and we saw them talking, like obviously they meant something to each other, like as friends, and now Pacey cares so deeply about Joey in a lot of ways, so that's why he's upset that he can't do this particularly for Joey. He can't just take everything and make it magically okay, which honestly makes him upset and makes Joey upset. And Mitch is like, "Why do you care so much?" Like, not like as in like what makes you care so much about this? And it isn't about the B&B, or it isn't about why everything's going on. Mitch knows that he put in a lot of work into this, and Mitch is like the only one that really sees it in this episode, which I think is just like Pacey needed that father figure in this episode, and I like how Mitch had to come in and help him out. So then we have the next scene, Pacey and Joey, where they're in the living room and the men are going around the fireplace trying to light it up as Gail, Jen, and Joey are around it trying to warm up. And Mitch says, "Okay, let's go in the air vent, okay? Guys, blah, blah, blah." The fire doesn't start, and Jen says, "We're gonna freeze." And Graham walking in says, "You never get started with the hickory on the bottom, may I?" The men stare at Graham as she takes over, and Graham's rearranged the wood, and she says, "Hickory is a glorious wood, but it is hard wood. We'll never burn it on its own. Small, soft pines go on the bottom, oak in the middle, and hickory on top." And she lights it up, and she says, "There we go." And Mitch is like, "Wow, I'm impressed." And Jen says, she climbs over her grown butter too. And Graham says, "Oh, I used to build a fire after dinner every night after winter." Jennifer's grandfather would sit in the leather chair, feet on the arm of men, and read to me. Some nights we'll travel with the hickory and the search of a great whale, or some nights we'll float down the Parish River with the hunkin' gin. Nearly every night at some point of our journey he'll fall asleep, chin on his chest, books in the lap, content. You know you love someone when you can spend the entire night just sitting by the fire watching them sleep. And Gal says, "Sounds like you loved him very much." And Graham says, "Love is the hardest in the woods. It takes a long time to heat up, but it does." And Jen says, "God, it smells good in here." And Graham says, "Hickory burning in the heat sounds like 46 years of my life." And Dawson says, "They smell good in the most powerful sense of the recall that we have. It come back to the kinds of burn experience." And Gail says, "Vanilla." And Mitch says, "Still?" And Gail says, "Every time I smell it, your father worked in the restaurant when we started dating." And Mitch says, "The Franklin family fish house." And Gail says, "And every night after work where he would come to pick me up, he always smelled like vanilla." And Mitch says, "Well, I used to soak my hands in it and to get the cool." And Dawson says the I keep messing up where all my stuff just keeps going everywhere. And I love when Mitch says he's going to soak his hand in vanilla, and then Dawson says, diamond is the main chemical to use the processed film that may happen the first time I go. Blah, 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 blah. And then Pacey says, this might sound goofy, but do you think it's possible to smell snow? Which, it reminds me of Gilmore Girls, I smell snow. And Mitch says, absolutely. And Pacey says, well, that's my first memory then. I don't know, I was maybe 2 or 3. And 3 years old. I was just distantly remember getting up on my tippy toes so I could look through the half window at the snow falling on the frozen creek. And everything just blanketed in silence. And Andy says her thing, which Jack's thing was high C and her thing was new car. Because when you go in the trips and you would always request a brand new rental. And I guess that kind of smell reminds you traveling together. And then Joey says bacon, sizzling, crackling, whipping into my bedroom while I sleep, starting my dreams and coating me into like, and Bessie says, I know that smell. And Joey says, Mom. And Bessie says, yeah. And Joey says, see, every Sunday when she didn't have to work, she would make breakfast. And I would find my way into the hallway and stand next to her in the stove. And we would talk about schools and boys, and we would take pancake batter and pour it into tiny molds into pine trees and animals. Mom would always love to cook and take care of everyone and hated working at that bar every night. She told me not to worry because especially she was going to make enough money and go and open up her very own breakfast and bed and breakfast. She obviously didn't get that chance to happen, so I thought I would give it a shot. So thank you for coming, us. You're the best fake guest the girl could ask for, but you can all go home now. And she leaves the room and notices Mr. Frank is standing in the doorway for an amount of time, and Joey says, Mr. Frank, I'm sorry you have been such a horrendous experience. I realize it's no five-star B&B, but I'm sure my mother would have loved it. Which, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, like, Joey really had that attachment to the B&B, not because she was, like, working hard to deal with it, but it was the fact that she wanted the experience that her mom never really got. And so, obviously, whenever your mom was talking about memories and everything like that, with the snow, to the high C, to the cars, to her mom, it was all those different kind of things that really meant something to them. Like, the fact that the B&B meant so much to Joey was the best thing that Joey could probably ask for. And it didn't really matter that the guy was standing out there, like, trying to figure everything out. It really mattered to Joey that, like, they were all there, and they were all kind of like, okay, like, even though this is, like, business that really took off, it matters to me that my mom would have loved this. And she's like, it may not be no 5-star, but it was the best thing that has ever happened to me. So then we have the next scene of Pacey and Joey, and the Potter B&B where Joey's room the next morning, and there's voices on the other side, and she wakes up, a smile across her face, and Ain't Too Proud to Beg is playing on the stereo as she makes her way into the kitchen, and everyone is dancing around, cooking breakfast, and setting to the table to eat. And some are singing, and some are dropping things while they dance, and, like, generally looking like they have a good time. And Joey says, so is someone going to tell me what's going on? And Pacey says, hey, you want some coffee? Could someone please get this lady a cup of coffee? Which I thought that was really cool. And Joey says, I thought everyone was going home. And Dawson says, well, you know, you slept late, you missed a lot. And he says, okay, you went to bed thing, it's time for the breakfast. And everyone finds a plate on the table, and Mr. Frank is at the head, and Pacey says, this is for you, Mr. Frank. And Joey says, morning, everyone. And they all say morning, and she goes, morning, Mr. Frankie. And he says, morning. And Joey says, you know, I could have still had some kinks to work out. We'll probably never have the fine lines of gourmet food that you're used to. And he says, the heat didn't work last night, but it is the warmest place I ever stayed at. And gesturing towards the Pancake says, and these pancakes may be the best in the country. And Andy says, all right. And Joey says, what am I missing? And Bessie says, why, whatever do you mean? And Joey says, well, for one thing, your pancakes are nowhere near this good. And Bessie says, and she goes, Bessie, and Pacey says, well, perhaps we should pay our compliments to the chef, huh? And all are like chatting, chef, 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 chef. And Bodie comes in, which I'm surprised Joey didn't realize that Alexander wasn't there. And with Alexander, and he says, now who here wants seconds? And Joey gets up and she runs towards him and she goes, Bodie, what are you doing here? And Bodie says, what do you mean? I wouldn't miss this for the world. And Bessie pulls out, Joey entered another room, and Bessie says, I was up hours last night thinking about what you said by the fire. And I went to the attic, and Joey says, look, Bessie, and Bessie holds up a guest book, and she says, Dad gave us this to Mom for Christmas 10 years ago. We signed it over breakfast, her first guest. How have I forgotten her dream? Which that's what Joey was trying to point out the whole entire episode. And Joey says, you had a few other things to worry about, Bessie. The lives of 2 kids. And Mr. Frank raising his glass and toast to the Potter B&B. May it live long and prosper. And Pacey, he goes, here, here. And Andy goes, yeah. And you can just tell that all of them are really excited for them. And also you can tell where Bessie finally gets Joey's dream and why she was really upset about everything and what it really meant to Joey. So then the next scene that we have is a Pacey, and he's outside helping Dawson with his camera. And Dawson says, Pacey, do you have any idea what you're doing? And Pacey says, well, I have put a lens on a cap on before, yeah? And Dawson says, I mean, just in general, everything's changing so rapidly. I have troubles finding my bearings, you know? And Pacey says, I'll second that emotion. And Dawson says, you know, I lay awake at night on my bed, staring at the walls, which have a blank aspect for a linen poster, trying to imagine the future. Imagine all the people waiting for today. You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I know I'm not the only one. And he continued to sing, and it was blank as the wall. All I can see is the past that I barely recognize anymore. Perfect example, you. And Pacey says, me. And Dawson says, you contribute this whole imaginings. You used to go and be predictable. I don't know. I mean, I thought that it was, you know, your relationship with Andy, but you're not with her, and still, I guess what I'm trying to say is thank you. And Pacey says, for what, man? And Dawson says, for what I asked you to do, taking care of Joey. You really went above and beyond the call. I mean, you did something really special for her. I'm glad she has you. And Pacey says, let me tell you something, man. It's no picnic, okay? That Potter girl, she ain't easy, alright? She's physically incapable of keeping her mouth shut for more than 2 seconds. She's got an opinion about everything. I mean, it's really unkinky, alright? So anytime you want to jump back in there, you know, let me know, and I'm eager to return to our scheduled programming. That's good enough for you? Dawson says, that'll be fun. That'll do fine, Pace. So, like, Pacey was kind of saying that, but really it wasn't Dawson's choice to come back in and sweep him under their feet. But it really had me thinking about this whole thing with the B&B and how much, like, Joey really knew it meant to her. I feel like Pacey encouraged her to continue the B&B because they might have gotten into a conversation about her mom and everything like that. And then finally he was like, why don't you build B&B? And she was probably like, you're ridiculous. And he's like, no, like, I'm serious. You should build this. And that's probably how the conversation started, but I really wish that we saw that conversation. They could have been walking down the highway like they were that one episode, and they could have been talking about that. But I don't really know. Like, it was just kind of one of those things where, yeah, Dawson asked for him to take care of her, but I feel like it wasn't so much Dawson anymore. It was just about how much Pacey cares about her and has probably always cared about her. So then we have the last scene of Joey and Pacey. And Pacey runs into the house and goes, Potter, Potter, look, I talked to the furnace guy. He said he'll come tomorrow if he didn't. And he finds Joey asleep on the couch under a blanket, and he walks over and kneels to the floor next to the couch as he covers her. And he stares at her for a moment and then walks away. And then later we see her still asleep on the couch under the blanket, and the only thing that's lit is the fireplace. And Pacey is sitting across from her watching her sleep, and you can just see like the awe in his face, and it's obvious that he sat there all night long. And that's my favorite part. Like, that is my favorite part, because when we go back to what Graham said earlier, she says when you really love someone, you will sit there all night long and watch them sleep by the fire. And she says love is the hardest in the wood. It takes a long time to heat up, but it does. And I think that was kind of like a foreshadow when Rance was talking about Jen's grandfather, how much them two meant to each other, and how much they loved each other, and how much she cared for him and could stare at him all night long. It kind of goes back to that, because when we think about it, like, it wasn't the fact that, like, Pacey was doing it because of Dawson, like we were talking about just a minute ago. It was the fact that, like, Pacey and Joey, like, grew this friendship. And I think this was the real first episode that you could see Pacey had feelings for Joey. And it was extreme. Because we gotten past the part where Dawson and Joey were a thing, and Andy and Pacey were a thing. Like, now this is a thing where, like, them two are finally being able to sit by each other and not fight. They could sit by each other and not get angry with each other. Like, this was the real episode that we could see where it was different than a season or two ago. Like, this was a different episode than we have seen in a long time. And you could see how patient he was throughout this episode, how much he would do anything for her. And I feel like this is really when his love for Joey came out. Like, it wasn't the fact that Joey told him to do it, or Dawson told him to do it, or anything like that. Like, you could just tell how the love in his eye for Joey, whenever she's talking, he pays attention. Like he says later in the season, I remember everything. And I think it goes back to the B&B where he remembers what she was talking about it. And that's why he tried so hard to make Joey happy with the B&B. It wasn't the fact that he was trying to, like, do it for labor work. Like, he was doing it because he wanted to. And I saw this video yesterday that I made a long time ago of my TikTok, aka Pacey and Joey, if you want to follow it. And it was like, most people try to come back with Dawson saying that he built a white fence, and then, like, I had this whole thing, but really, like, Dawson may have built a white fence, but Pacey made the B&B happen. Like, that was the most important thing for, like, Bessie and Joey and the Potter girls, and he really made it happen. And I love how, like, Pacey is even kind of nervous when Dawson thanks him earlier, like, thank you for taking care of Joey. Like, he goes, like, it's no problem, it's no picnic, okay? Like, that Potter girl, she ain't easy, but you can just see, like, how much he really does care when he's, like, all nervous about Dawson, like he's been caught in something. But it really meant, like, Pacey really, like, cared about Joey and how much she meant to him. It was a big deal to him. Like, it was a big deal that Dawson was saying that, but it was kind of a big deal to him because things have changed. Like, there were so many things. It wasn't like season 3, episode 1, where he was like, no, man, I don't want to take care of Joey. And now he's, like, over here helping her with the furnace, helping her with the bathroom, mopping the floor, like, doing all this different kind of stuff because of how much he cares about her. And that is the real deal about this episode, because when you go back to the past episodes, like, you can tell, like, finally they're over, like, everything. Like, Pacey, like, really noticed. I was saying earlier Mitch was the first one to notice it, but really Jen was. Jen was the first one to notice all of that, and I apologize for saying that earlier. But yeah, like, you can tell, like, from episode 9, where, like, Pacey is finally caught in, like, that little white lie where he wants to make out with Jen because he wants to have a sexual relationship. Really, it was him wanting to push aside his feelings with Andy and Joey. And I think now, finally, he knows he still has those feelings, but I think this was the real first episode where you could just definitely tell that something was really, really, really up. And that's my favorite part of this episode. So, if you like this episode, please make sure to subscribe on the YouTube channel. That's Jacey's Creek Podcast, where I post every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. There's also other platforms that you can listen to, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Make sure to review this podcast with kind words, please, only. Make sure you comment, subscribe, share, whatever you need to do. And also, you can catch every episode again on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I would love to hear your thoughts on Instagram. That's Witter and Potter. And my TikTok is Pacey and Joey. I hope to see you guys again at Friday and Saturday and Sunday. I love hearing your guys' thoughts, so please, 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 please make sure to comment down below. Bye guys!